Stephen Cowan has been leader of Hammersmith and Fulham Council since 2014. Long before COVID arrived, he was working to develop his borough as a global centre for biotech, setting up a joint venture with Imperial College. And he's also promoted the area as a centre for digital, the arts and the creative industries. Now, though, he's going to talk about the work of all the councils in the West London Alliance and introduce its economic recovery strategy for West London. So to explain all about that, I'm delighted now to hand over to Councillor Stephen Cowan. Stephen.
Thank you very much, Mark, and very much appreciated for that introduction. I'm speaking here today as the chair of the West London Economic Prosperity Board, a board that was set up way before COVID in a way of organising ourselves into such a organisation that we can take advantage of the best opportunities available to us on the planet. I'm going to talk about a few things in the next few minutes to give some perspective. But I think, as everybody knows, there has been the huge change that COVID-19 has brought. It's not just a challenge to the people of the whole of the United Kingdom, and indeed our planet, on health issues, but it offers up the prospect of the biggest recession since the 1720 recession. Now that, for all intents and purposes, makes it the biggest recession ever. And I talk to you, surprisingly, for many of you to realise, in my 50s. And that means I have been part of a blessed generation, one of 2 or 3 blessed generations that have existed since the end of the Second World War. Because not only have we not experienced war, we have not experienced the type of economic depression that my grandparents went through in the 1930s. But those stories and the literature that now colours our imagination about what that time was like demonstrate the harshness that the governments singularly failed back in the 1930s to get right, and all the consequences of getting it wrong brought about as nation states collapsed and society spiraled out of control. So that's the bad news. The good news, of course, is we have all of those lessons well under our belt. And despite the Chancellor of the Exchequer being in a different party to me, I think that he has reacted quickly and firmly with a variety of different schemes to support businesses and to support people as they face unemployment. And indeed, there are many things that are different about our society that offer up the hope that we will come through this quickly. So will it be a U-shaped recession? Will it be a V-shaped recession, whereas once the vaccine has arrived, we will spring out as if never before confronted by any sort of recession? What will it look like? Well, we know that we have the capabilities here in West London to come out of any type of recession bigger and better than we went into it for many, many different reasons. I think we can have a huge amount of hope. As Mark said in the introduction, if we look at West London from the beginning and take a moment just to ponder, what does this place have added advantage? Well, in our west, we have Heathrow, and we are the perfect spot for anybody wanting to do business with the city who wants to settle in between. So with the city here and Heathrow there, there's an economic whole host of economic possibilities in between. And anyone who's done even GCSE geography will tell you that what makes an area really work is the level of infrastructure. Well, look at our road network, our motorways, our vast amounts of tube stations, and you can see already from a transport infrastructure that we are roughly 800 years ahead of East London. Now, I would like to see East London catch up, but at the same time, it is to our advantage that we have such riches in infrastructure. And then you look at what this infrastructure looks like in the people and the skills that they have developed and the possibilities for new technology. And again, you can see that we have a highly educated workforce and a population that is used to being in work and contributing to the economy. So these are many of the strengths. But then begin to look around and see some of the leading institutions, whether it's Westfield, whether it's developers like Romulus, or whether it is, in fact, Olympia and all the possibilities around that. Look out to Heathrow, look at the basin of employment around the M4 corridor, which enriches Hounslow. Look at the possibilities for media in both from Hammersmith to Ealing, and look at the infrastructure and all the jobs and all the size of the economy that affects the outer ring of West London, which is all down to Heathrow, which is indeed the region's biggest employer. So these are the strengths that the area has. And as Mark said, with pre-COVID-19, the GVA of 74 billion, the West London economy was bigger than Birmingham, Leeds and Glasgow combined. So it's a vital engine for the UK economy. And as Mark pointed out, 4% of national GVA comes directly out of West London. Now, here's the thing. If we look back to the Great Depression and we look back to every recession we've had since, there has been one feature of how the British economy has recovered, and it's London. London has pulled the UK economy out of every single depression and recession. And that makes a very important message to government, because it would be very easy for government focused on its levelling up agenda to just think that the investment to level up has to purely go into the north. But our offer can surely be that if they get it right in West London, then the on effects to the rest of the United Kingdom will be significantly amplified, that they get a much greater return on their investment. Now, to be honest, that's a tough pitch for us to make at the moment. Whilst the government focused on shovel-ready schemes, we put in a bid for the whole of London and got just 22 million in shovel-ready schemes investment, whereas in the northeast, they got well over 250 million pounds of investment. So there is a job for all of us to do. Academic institutions, the NHS, businesses, large and small, to make the case for West London and for getting shovel-ready investment into that area. And where should that shovel-ready investment go? Well, as the chair of the West London Economic Prosperity Board, I can tell you we have a variety of different sector potential plans. And in fact, West London has the opportunity to develop a growth sectors innovation districts spanning the sub-region and branching out across the country. And I think that's got to be the number one message forward, looking at how we're going to grow the economy. And seeing the recent poll that I just popped up on the screen, I'm pleased to see that all of you agree with me. But in total, the recovery plan is structured around 7 key themes, which combine West London's collective strengths and strategic priorities. And whilst growth sectors is the first on the list, and I think the most important, there are 6 others. And I will come back to growth sectors. The next is aviation communities. The near closure of Heathrow, West London's largest employer, has had a catastrophic impact on our aviation communities. Together, West London councils are exploring a range of options for how we best support those communities, with possible opportunities including the establishment of an aviation communities fund to support revenue and capital investment. In the short term, our priority must be to minimise job losses. Once people are unemployed, it's very hard to get them back into jobs, particularly the longer they're unemployed. And if young people fail to get onto the job ladder, then often you have a lost generation. So making sure that our biggest employment sector does not go through a cycle of having to literally restart from scratch, and the individuals devastated by that effect, is got to be a key thing for us. But in the medium term to long term, our ambition is to move the residents who've been traditionally worked into Heathrow into other areas. And that does mean skills and employment training. And I was very pleased that last week when we looked at, I chaired the West London Recovery Board, so many impressive people from a range of organisations began to take part and offered up their ideas. But what's clear is Britain has got to be more nimble in the way that we retrain and reskill people to be able to take the opportunities that we bring around them. And I say we in the most collective sense. I mean, the collective economy, government, business, everybody together. And that does mean working closely with our colleges and academic institutions to make sure that we can act with agility. We will support employers to take on apprentices and utilise levy to enable upskilling in work. Councils are developing a single front door approach for those seeking work or reskilling. And we will encourage investment in green and digital skills as we develop a West London talent pool for the knowledge economy and green economy that we think will help us build back better. Entrepreneurs are going to be fundamental to our growth. We have the infrastructure, we have the access to finance, we have many riches across the West London economy. But it is the entrepreneurs with their creativity and determination that will turn the ideas into enterprises. And West London is an enterprise hotspot with 165,000 self-employed people and 104,000 micro businesses. The Build and Recovery Plan will nurture and grow our thriving enterprise scene by increasing skills levels of the self-employed in traditional enterprise entry businesses. And we will develop more incubator and accelerator workspace, ensuring our entrepreneurs and startups have the space required to give the business's ambitions a real go. Let me tell you something interesting. When we came into office in 2014, my colleague Andrew Jones, who is Professor Andrew Jones, who is a professor of economic geography, which means his job was to look at economic ecosystems around the world and work out what works and what doesn't. And we talked a lot about what do we need to do to make Hammersmith and Fulham the best place for business in Europe, the European Union. And we looked at a number of different people to try and help us. But in the end, we set up a business commissioner. We asked an individual business person, would he act as our business commissioner and develop our business plan for us? And we didn't pay him. He was someone who was doing us a favor, but he phoned around different businesses and surveyed those businesses and came up with a plan. Now, because he was busy doing something else, which I'll tell you about in a second, he brought in another business commissioner. So we now have two business commissioners in Hammersmith and Fulham, Sophie Devonshire. And Sophie is a business advisor and author and is a famous contributor to tech industries. But the first person was a gentleman called Greg Jackson. Now, as well as doing all this, at the same time, Greg Jackson was setting up Octopus Energy, which you'll have seen the posters and banners as you drive around. It's the most successful startup energy company in Britain, and it's one of the first unicorn businesses, a business to rapidly grow to £1 billion turnover in a very long time in the UK. So there's something interesting about asking busy people to do things, because Greg gave us a very clear business startup support package for entrepreneurs, as well as setting Octopus Energy up at the time. And there were several features of that. Affordable, flexible office space was one of the key features. If you look at why businesses went to Old Street and why previously they were in London Bridge, it was affordable, flexible, cheap office space. So trying to tie that into our planning system, I think, will be important as we look forward in West London, to give people the chance to start a business and employ people without all the hassle of taking long-term leases and other structural cost into those businesses. And therefore, we need to be more imaginative and more pro-entrepreneur than we've ever been to support those entrepreneurs as they grow their businesses. And I certainly look forward to doing that. If you look around about these, what the geography of different parts of our boroughs look like and around West London, then one feature of the modern world has been the depleting town centres. As shops closed up, charity shops moved in, and things began to dissipate. But with lockdown, what we've seen is people will spend more time at home, and maybe they will work from home as businesses begin to reappraise their office structures and work out how often they need people to come into the office. So there is an opportunity for us here as we look to build that better for our town centres. And this fits a little bit with the work Greg Jackson did for us in what makes a great place for business. Because what makes a great place for business is a place where your employees can go out after work and mingle and mix and enjoy life, which is a fundamental part, especially if you're a tech business looking to employ lots of young people who need to get together after work as much as they do within work. So having revitalised town centres where we breathe life back into the town centres, ensuring that they're green, clean places to be, with coffee shops, restaurants, bars, and shops that all meet the market demands, I think is a real opportunity for us. And any London person will tell you the next factor of our economic growth, which is housing and infrastructure, has been a key problem for successive governments, and particularly in London, as prices drive people out of the economy and make it very hard for young people to come in with all their energy and enterprise and take part in the economy. So building genuinely affordable homes where people can live and flourish and feel they're getting value in their life is fundamentally important. And it will be an infrastructure spend that rebuilds the economy as we talk. And then there is a green recovery. It is simply not sustainable to carry on polluting our environment as we do and belching out tailpipe gases, whether it's from aeroplanes or cars or lorries or buses, has to stop. And so it's encouraging to see the government moving forward on that, arguing for a new electric transport and indeed other transports, as you see people traveling around in everything from electric skateboard to more bicycling and cycling. So we will support the delivery of public sector decarbonisation schemes. We will promote and enable the take-up of green homes grant schemes in West London, and we'll accelerate shovel-ready infrastructure projects aligned with growth sectors. And that's what we will do. But if I go back to the first issue, is growth sectors. All of us have a duty at any point in history to reshape the future and learn the lessons of the past. So I don't believe this recession will be as bad as the Depression, because we have learned the lessons of the past. But I do believe we need to think bigger and more creatively than we've ever thought before. Not just because the young people today require it and our citizens require it, but because history requires it. So when we think about how we build back the West London economy, let's think about the year 2050 and how we want it to be. A green society where we contribute to the oxygen levels and there is no pollution and CO2 emissions coming from our economic sectors. A world where maybe there's no poverty and everyone is able to live a fulfilled life, working and contributing to their communities, but still part of very stronger communities with no crime and huge opportunities for innovation and learning. And a world where West London is at the heart of what's going on globally, with innovators like Imperial College London and other institutions across the whole of the City of London. How do we turn those ideas into entrepreneurial businesses and then to corporations and anchor businesses within our society? All of us in this room today can play a part in building that future. And when we do it, we should do it with genuine ambition, because I think the future is as bright as we will make it. And I think in West London, it will be bright because we will make it so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Stephen. That was excellent. I love your utopian vision of West London. It sounds like a perfect place to live. I want to just we haven't got a lot of time for questions, and indeed we've had a couple on the Q&A. Do keep putting your questions forward. I can see one on Heathrow, so we can maybe pick that up during the aviation workshop a bit later on. But I wanted to ask you actually, I mean, what would seem to me to be central to your approach to how we kind of build back after COVID is going to be on retraining and reskilling. And that's, we are going to see this change, and particularly potentially around aviation, but around other industries too. And I just wondered how the Alliance and how you were thinking in terms of how you would approach that challenge, because that seems to me to be the key to ensuring that people, don't end up unemployed and with all the long-term problems that would create.
Well, I think there's two keys. I think the lesson from a depression was you need huge government intervention, as you saw with Roosevelt in the United States and the New Deal. And we need that type of level of infrastructure spend, and we need those jobs to be created in the short term. And that comes in, then I think we can very much align the skills and the training. But it's interesting the sort of power you have as a local council leader. You have two types. You have the hard power, the statutory ability to do things like guide, teaching and training. But the bigger power, much more important power, is the soft power you have as convening and facilitating. So what we've already been doing with the West London Recovery Board is convening all the colleges and all the academic institutions and indeed the schools and saying, how quickly can we begin to turn around some of these skills? Now, as you know, the most important thing in training is to direct it to where the market need is. And that does mean a very clear relationship with the businesses. And again, that's soft power. So we have two messages to businesses, which is in the short term, work with us to do that, and we will make sure you have the people you need. Most businesses in West London are very nervous about, certainly the tech end and the high end, are very nervous about getting the best possible people recruited whilst the Brexit negotiations are happening, and Britain seems to be closing in on itself a bit. And that does have an effect when they are used to globally recruiting people from across Europe and indeed around the world. So part of our message has to be is take a long-term talent management strategy where you grow people locally. So work with our schools, our primary schools upwards, but also work with our retraining centres and also work with our academic institutions and colleges. And that is quite a difficult job to do. It's not unlike, it is a case of trying to get everyone on the same page. But I can tell you after last week's meeting, there was genuine goodwill and people were genuinely positive about doing that. And I think we can get it done. And already we're making some headway into the first chapter of that story.